the history of the Hurricane Center
Yeah.
and your experience there.
Oh, yeah.
So what was your first experience with the Hurricane Center? How did you get introduced?
Well, when I first joined what is now the National Hurricane Center, that was in 1961. There was no National Hurricane Center as we know it today. There were 5 hurricane forecast offices: Boston, Washington, New Orleans, and Puerto Rico, and Miami. So when a hurricane come along, it would just be moved from one office to the next office. There was no coordination, national coordination. There was no coordination with the media. There was no coordination with emergency managers. We just said, here's the latest advisory. You got it, go. Do your thing. And so it was in 1967 that the National Hurricane Center was organized as it is today, and we hired 5 hurricane forecasters, all with advanced degrees in meteorology, to come in and then to manage the hurricane problem for the nation.
So initially you were basically in the local Weather Bureau office
absolutely.
in Miami.
Absolutely.
And that's where you guys had the dual role, or the office at least had a dual role of dealing with hurricanes and also the weather for South Florida.
Yeah, no, I would write forecasts for the state or for the Miami area, then turn around and write an advisory. There was no big staff. We had one extra person that would be available to do the advisories for the hurricane.
So when you originally arrived there, where was the office located?
Well, we were located in Miami in an old hotel facility that went bankrupt during the Depression, and they kind of remodeled it, and that's where our office was.
Was that the facility on 27th Avenue?
27th Avenue and 36th Street.
And then from there, when the Hurricane Center was established?
Well, once we established, I think it was 1964, we moved to the University of Miami campus. And at that time, there was a National Hurricane Research Laboratory, and we joined our forces there on the campus. And we also had some influence there with they had a department of meteorology at the University of Miami, so it was a really, really nice relationship.
And you were all in the same building there?
All in the same building.
That was, I think they call it the technology building.
Right.
It's still there.
Yeah.
The original building.
Yeah.
So that's where you went, that's where you worked?
That's right.
And so the local Weather Service office, Weather Bureau office, that stayed at the...
No, there was a piece of it that did aviation forecasting out at the airport.
Okay.
But the state forecast and the marine forecast, we all moved together out onto the campus.
Can you tell me a little bit about the facility, the building?
Right.
You guys had a radar on top of that building, didn't
We
you?
sure did. We had a radar, and we had this big emergency power generator out there in case we lost power. And remember now, we're talking about the 60s. By that time, we had a network of coastal radars, so we would see a hurricane as approached on the radar. And remember now in the 60s, that's when we began to see satellite pictures. And we also had the development of numerical models, and that all came in the 60s. At the same time, we moved to the campus and developed the National Hurricane Center. And so that's when we really begin to see progress in not only the forecasting, but the communication of that forecasting to the public.
So at that time, when you guys moved to that new facility, the radar equipment that was there, was that the only radar site in Miami, or was there another?
No, there was only, well, the aviation have their own radars that track airplanes. They can also track weather too, but basically they're designed to track airplanes. So in terms of weather, there was the one radar there. There was another radar down at Key West, another radar at Tampa, and another radar up on the northeast coast. I don't remember. I think it was around Melbourne.
At that point in time, was your facility the most up-to-date technologically in comparison to other facilities, or were all you guys kind of updated at the same time?
Oh no, we had a big computer complex there. It's kind of interesting that, remember now, we had the space flight program that started also in the 60s. And so when NASA came down, rather than duplicate that whole effort there in Melbourne, they decided, well, we'll just use your facilities. So they assigned their forecasters to Miami, and we helped make forecasts for the first space flight.
Was there additional equipment up there near the space facility in Central Florida? More instrumentation to kind of see what was going on with the weather?
Well, they of course had they set up their own radar like that, so they did have some facility there. But the forecasts for those early manned flights were made out of Miami.
So after that point in time, we're in the late 60s now, you dealt with Hurricane Camille.
Right.
How did that all go? How did you feel being in that office at that point in time and dealing with that type of storm?
Well, Camille was a very powerful storm. There's only been 3 Category 5 storms make landfall in the United States. One of them was Camille in 1969 on the Mississippi coast. Now, interesting story about Camille. It emerged from the Caribbean Sea and started into the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, it was strengthening a little bit, but we didn't know how much it was going to strengthen. And so we had a Navy plane fly out, and I'm talking about the Navy plane, the old Super Connie, the triple tail, down there. They had a powerful radar on that plane. And when they took a look at that radar and saw the size and the strength of Camille, they refused to penetrate. So we didn't know how strong it was. So we got on the line and said, would the Air Force turn around a crew that had just been in it and fly back into it? And that's when we found out that it was a Category 5 storm, and we found that out just before making landfall. And fortunately, it was early enough that we could include in our advice to the people that, hey, there could be a 20-foot storm surge here. Never had anything like that in any hurricane advisory in the past. And because of that, a lot of people evacuated.
And at that point in time, your boss was
Dr. Robert Simpson.
Dr. Robert Simpson.
Absolutely. No, I was his deputy. I was his deputy in '72. I was a hurricane forecaster, but he was the director of the Hurricane Center. I think he became director in '68. So he was the director in 1969.
Before that would have been Grady Norton?
No, there was a man by the name of Gordon Dunn, right. Grady Norton goes all the way back into the 40s and the 50s, and Grady Norton, if I remember right, died in 1964 during Hurricane Hazel that was moving on to the North Carolina. Yeah, 54, whatever I said.
So at that point in time,
it was Gordon Dunn,
took
over, right. So when I went to the Hurricane Center in 1961, see, Gordon Dunn was my boss. And then he was replaced by Dr. Simpson in 1968.
So how did that transition take place?
Well, the transition was very interesting, see, because before that we had the 5 hurricane forecast offices. And when Dr. Simpson come on the scene, he said, no, we got to change this thing. And you remember back in those years, the computers were the size of a room, and they were very expensive. And so we had a computer set up there in Miami, and they decided rather than duplicate those at these other 4 hurricane forecast offices, we would combine everything into Miami itself and establish what is now known as the National Hurricane Center. And we hired 5 people that had advanced degrees, either masters or PhDs in meteorology, to become the staff of the National Hurricane Center. So we had made that transition just before Camille hit.
Now, did you guys pull anybody from those other offices that were dealing with hurricane duties?
No, only one. Only one of the other, out of New Orleans came to Miami and joined our staff. But the rest of them were, well, like I had a PhD, and we had 2 others that had PhDs or were advancing towards PhD. Everybody at least had a master's degree in the original hurricane forecast.
And that was a requirement set by
that was part of the plan. Let's hire people and then see what we were going to do in the off season is we were going to do research. So we wanted to have the academic people that could come in and do research and try and improve the hurricane forecast.
From there, how did the 70s progress? We had technology that was coming in now.
Exactly.
Dealing with satellites, you had the radar there. How did you feel about all that, getting all that new data, all that new information, and being able to put out forecasts?
Well, let me tell you what a major transition took place when I took over, and that would have been in 1974. When we had the 5 hurricane forecasters there, we were dealing with the technology. We were doing research. We had satellite pictures. We were looking at all kinds of things, and we'd write papers and have them published in our professional journals. So we still weren't paying much attention to communicating this information to the emergency managers. And when I took over the office in 1974, I asked my staff, I said, I wonder how many people along the coastline have ever experienced a major hurricane? Nobody knew. So we did we took all the coastal counties and then looked to see how many had experienced a major hurricane. And there was something like 40 million people from Maine to Texas living in the coastal county. 85% had never experienced a major hurricane. It occurred to me that we could put out a meteorological perfect warning and still have a disaster because people didn't know how to respond, and the emergency managers probably didn't know how to respond. So that made a major change in philosophy, and I began to go out and give talks And I also went out and began to have workshops with emergency managers and also the public and the media. I invited the media to come right into our office as we were writing advisory so they could see the uncertainty that was taking place in the forecast.
Talked a little bit earlier, and
Yeah.
you had mentioned Mr. Jim Leonard,
Right.
who recently passed away.
Oh, yes,
can,
he did.
Can you tell me a little bit about your experience
Yeah.
with him and him coming into your office?
Yeah, Jim Leonard and a couple other people used to chase hurricanes, and they would come into the office after they had chased hurricanes, and they'd all gather in the conference room and begin to change notes. Well, at those stages, they didn't have very good cameras, but they had good recorders in terms of noise. And they would play these noise recorders back. Whoa, listen to that, listen to all that noise. That house just disappeared, look at it. They couldn't see it, but they heard the noise on it. And Jim Leonard was one of those young guys that was doing that. I was a little concerned about those guys because I was afraid that they were going to get themselves caught sometime and be damaged or injured or maybe even killed.